So actually, we actually got quite a bit left to do, and because the last time I thought we had was a little longer than what we did, but we've actually got another 3 hours to go through. So what I'm going to try and do is go through it and cut down what we think is necessary to fill these out. But these probably will be again in the region of 25 to 30 minutes each video. So let's get on into it.
How many fucking hours on case text reading appellate and Supreme Court of Texas decisions on the TCPA because I wanted to learn more about how the decisions are made. So it'll be figured out in the end, whether you and Monica win and you guys get your full fees, you know, or Vic gets whatever.
Right.
I want to figure out what we do now. What can we do now and make things better? Not just for you, but for everyone. How can we
That's a great question.
make the whole fucking thing, I don't want to say go away. This is a scar that will never heal over.
Right.
Everyone's impacted. Everyone's hurt. You're hurt. Nick's hurt. I'm sure Ty. I'm sure Vic. You are in a very powerful position right now, and I don't think you know it. And if you do, then I'm curious as to why you haven't used it. Is you have a very strong ability to make, you and Monica do, healing motions for the community. Mm-hmm. And that's nothing that requires an admission of guilt, or like, there are ways for you to bridge that gap.
Right.
You can do that amongst yourselves, amongst the contentions with the fans, with Vic, with Nick, with everyone. Why not do that? Why not? It would help. It would get rid of all the stress.
100%.
And that is something that we are actively doing now. For instance, me coming on the show, speaking to people that I know don't share the same views, speaking with you, who has, put out a very detailed description of who you perceive me to be based on some very horrible things that I've done in the past. So
it's not all based on your past, though. I'm basing a lot of it off of now.
Yeah, and current, which is fair. That's you're right. But there are certain things, like for me, we have to wait to certain time periods. And I know that's very frustrating. But once this is over and it's done, so if he goes to Supreme Court, cool, we go to Supreme Court. When that's over, there's going to be a very concerted effort to bring back a feeling of peace and calmness and rational thinking and processing. Like, it shouldn't be the end of everyone. It shouldn't be like, Monica's doing great, but that's awesome. But why are other people hurting? Why do people have to continue in this hate? It doesn't have to be that way. And that's our goal in the end of this, is that however it turns out, right? But in the end, there are people that were hurt from this that maybe didn't have to. And once this is over, I said this on the last show. If Vic wanted to meet with me and have a conversation, I would do it. I'd meet him. I'd have a coffee with him and chit chat. I'm not one of the people that, have come forward with an account of
No, he wouldn't. He keeps going on saying he's trying to make himself look like a good guy, but he's not, because if Vic wants to meet, we can do this, we can do that. Why can't you extend your hand for that instead? Why is it got to be Vic's got to do it? Why can't you do it? It's that sort of thing. And to be honest with you, I really do think he's trying to now get Ken and Cress and Mr. Hop, trying to get a few people who are watching this to come onto his side. That's what I personally think about this at the moment, just because he's like, well, if Vic wants to talk, we'll talk. If he wanted to sit down, we'll go and sit down, we'll do this. I really don't think that's what he wants.
Of a situation with him, right? So I can separate those things. That they have to deal with that with him on their own. With me, if he wants to sit down and have a chat with me and chit chat and let's see how we can heal the community, cool, let's do that, bro. Because guess what? I hope the best for him. I hope he makes a comeback, because there's a lot of fans who love him and love his work. And that's the part where I feel really hurt that people put words in my mouth, because I'm very passionate about redemption. And I think that he deserves that. And that's the part that sucks, is that people want to put, I will fight the lawsuit as far as he wants to go. We want to go Supreme Court, redo Supreme Court. I stand by every statement. I haven't deleted anything. I didn't take down a single thing. That's part of it. There's Twitter data. Cool.
Well, and this is another unfair question, just briefly, because you said if he wants to take it to the Supreme Court, if it comes back and they bring you back into the lawsuit with an appeal, would you appeal to the Supreme Court at that point?
I think there's a different process, because like we would have I think if anything came back off appeals, we would have the right to appeal that section, right? And then there's a whole process and wizardry that I pay a shit ton, and Monica and I pay a shit ton to get done.
He keeps going on about money. So far, in this 2 hours and 40 minutes of this 5 hour and 20-minute podcast, he has mentioned money approximately 20 to 22 times. And the way he's asked Cress, he goes, "Oh, what's the biggest check you wrote?" It's like that. And he keeps going on, "I can afford this, I can do this, I can buy that, I can buy this." It's not about money, Ron. So it doesn't matter how many times you say, "Well, if he wants to go there, I'll keep going. I got money. We paid a shit ton of money for this. We paid a shit ton for that." It doesn't matter about the money. This is why a lot of people don't follow your side, because you keep making it about personal things, like, oh, it's about money, it's this, it's that. It's not. What this all is, first of all, you keep saying that you want to have a sit down with him, to talk, hash something out. You could have done that in mediation. You could also extend your hand now and say, "Let's talk." But you're not doing it. You're literally saying, "Well, if he wants to, he can, blah, blah, blah," but I'm not. It's almost like you're trying to be, "Well, I'm not backing down." You're trying to still be, as you put it in your own, who you used to be. The big tough guy who used to deal with everything with anger. No. If you've changed, show people. Go out and personally speak to your lawyer, then go and see Vic. Or ring Vic or whatever. Or your lawyer will probably be like, "Oh no, what you said, yeah, it's very good what you said. We caught you, we taught you well on that." That's what I personally think is going to happen.
They would go through the process and do their thing. But say hypothetical, in a world where something was determined that was inappropriate. You know what I do? I pay the fucking money. Because if I did something that the court said was inappropriate or wrong, I just own up to my shit. Like, that's just part of it. I knew the consequences of my tweets and my actions and my words, and shit happens. If I got to pay a bill, I pay a bill.
Okay.
So what if the bill? Sorry, Ken. I'll let you continue in just a second. But what if the bill is an apology?
I pay the bill.
All right, you can go ahead, Ken.
No problem with it.
So I've got a couple of questions, Ron.
Yeah.
At this point in the game, and we're like 16, 17 months in, I suck at counting.
Long fucking time. Just go with that.
Yeah, long fucking time.
Yeah, long time.
Long enough. Do you forgive Vic for what happened from his side?
I've never not had forgiveness for Vic. I don't have any hard feelings towards Vic.
Do you still see Vic as a predator, or the other ways you've described him?
I feel that he does. Well, that's an interesting question, because I've seen photographs that seem like he's adjusted his type of behavior that I thought was a concern. So I don't have enough data yet. But okay. I do see signs of positive stuff. I do believe that when he said he was getting help, I believe that he would do that for his fans and for himself.
Ron, what the hell? Oh my! Literally now, just watching this, and in my mind, all I can go back and think of is the tweets that Ron sent, the things that he was calling Vic, the things that other people were calling Vic, and he was like, "Yes, he is. He's this. He's that." And now you're like, "Oh, I've always had forgiveness for him."
And I see sign in his photographs, and I brought that up on our last conversation because I saw some photos from KitchenerCon and some other conventions that he's done that looked awesome. So for me, that's why this is a fucking stupid thing, because it's like, great, he did the shit he was supposed to do. Cool, good job. End of story. But now we got a lawsuit that's a lot of expense, and
he's trying to get people on his side now. That is my personal belief. Because he's like, oh, he's doing this, he's doing good, yeah. I never hated him, I never done this. Yes, you did. We have the text to prove it.
You know, it is what it is. But for me, I don't have any hard feelings towards him. And I'm encouraged to see the positive stuff that he did at the cons that have come forward. And I haven't heard any negative things about him. I haven't, since the lawsuit began. So it's like, cool. It sounds like he did the things that he promised his fans that he would do.
One of the things I was talking to Chrome and Mr. Hop about before you jumped on the stream here earlier was the perception of social interactions by different cultures and different people. And, Vic, very much identifies with his Italian heritage.
Sure.
And is very, affectionate in that way. And it's very, and part of my background's Italian too, so I kind of get it. Hugging or very close. And it's very cordial. And if you were to jump over to Europe, your standard greeting is the kiss on the cheek thing.
And a hug.
The two kisses.
That's fair.
Is it possible that a lot of this wasn't actually inappropriateness and was a misunderstanding of someone's culture? And, like I said, in a way, it could almost be seen as xenophobic if you're projecting your culture on another person's and you're trying to set the standards of your culture on someone else's.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that is very possible that could be the case. And that's why I feel like this lawsuit didn't make any sense, because I think a lot of the interaction could be a myth. I can't remember if he's 57 or 58. There's times change and adapt. In the 60s and 70s, in the 60s, we had segregation. Obviously, that isn't the case anymore, thankfully. But he comes from a different time period. So that's why it was such an thing that baffled us. Is like, adapt, bro. Back then it was 2019. It's 2020 now. Like, we get it. Things change.
But some of his stuff wasn't inappropriate, though.
Well, and that's a matter of perception.
A lot of it. Well, again, it's that culture thing.
Right.
So for many people, it's not.
Because, like, I'm Irish. Then every bit of my anger and aggression and fights is totally acceptable because I'm Irish, and that's how we fucking deal with shit, right?
Well, it depends on the part of the world that you're in. But
yeah, you can't just go around doing
that.
Right? Like I like this show called Outlander. It's amazing. If any of you guys haven't seen it, watch it because it's got everything for everybody. But like, some shit was acceptable back then that isn't acceptable now. It's adaptation. Cool. You thought it was okay to do this. Some people didn't agree with you. End of story. That's it. And that's how I felt about it. Like, this isn't about this and that. Like, dude, just adapt. Some people didn't like it. Some people did. Shit happens. Everybody might have offended somebody at some point in their life. Let's just move forward. But a big, huge hoopla of shit came out and all this drama when words were put in our mouth that weren't there. You know what I mean? Like, I do think there was just a misunderstanding a lot of times based on culture.
A lot of people, myself, Nick Ricada, Tug, Yellow Flash, SG Sammy, you name it, all of us, we've all given our own opinion on what they've said. What they've said is that, we've basically read their tweets online, and then we've gone out and said, well, they've said this is what we think this means. This is what we think that means. It's commentary. That's what it is. And when you get people like Amanda Windley, for example, who tried actually striking one of my videos, but she didn't win. I fought it and everything else. Well, actually, I just sent YouTube an email and they were like, yeah, it's not hers. Because I gave them the actual person who filmed it, their thing, and they were like, yeah, it's fine, you can use it. So when you have that, and then when you have someone like Amanda Windley trying to censor what you're saying, and then you've got Ron saying, oh, it's only a misunderstanding, words were put into our mouths. No, we are telling people what you've said. We're reading out your tweets, your texts, your depositions, your actual court transcripts. We're the ones who are reading them out and giving our opinion. So I don't know how you can say, for certain people, oh, well, they're putting words in our mouths. No, we're not. We're just reading what you've said.
But that doesn't make it any less appropriate when there's videos out there where he has to ask if your dad's here and then explain how people are going to call him X, Y, and Z, but then still choosing to do the thing that he knows is going to cause him online ridicule, right?
So did you see my analysis of that video?
I don't remember if I saw it or not, so I apologize about that.
That's fine. I know some of my stuff was pretty thorough.
I apologize for not seeing it. If you want to forward it to me, I don't know how to put that information to you, but I'd love to look at it.
I think I tagged you in the reply on the forums when I did it, and because it was part of my long ass response.
Okay.
That's the long one. I
Sure.
don't remember the page off the top of my head, but
Is it on Kiwi Farms?
yeah, it's on the forums. It's in the thread. It's in your and Monica's thread. It's not in the AMA. It's in your thread.
That website's so confusing. I don't know how to use it, and it like has this weird error when you tweet, or text or whatever it's called. It like you can't reply a bunch of times, and it's hard to track it. And I'm out on that site. I'm like,
It took a minute to learn the form system. I won't deny. I'll give you that one.
cool.
Email correspondence.
Email's great. I'm like,
I only do Telegraph. I'm sorry.
like got is sweet. Faxing.
Faxing. Oh gosh.
Let me bring up my dial-up mode real quick.
I got clean in my room.
So in my analysis of that video you put out there, because in your response to me, you said, look at this video and analyze this, and I did. And this is why, and again, I wasn't picking on you. It was when I was analyzing your personality.
Yeah.
Do you perceive the people's reaction in that room to how Vic handled the situation is correct or incorrect? So was Vic's handling of that, okay, or is it wrong for the people to think it was okay? So there's a whole room full of people who find that is an okay interaction. It was fine.
Yeah. And so that's a great thing. And this is how I would approach him. Now, if I'm looking at it from a fan's perspective, it would probably be very fun and exciting to see kind of that another person getting excited because of a role in a show. So I get that moment, kind of like seeing the Beatles or Michael Jackson, or, if I got to meet Charles Lindbergh or, something like that. I would have an emotional reaction. So if I'm looking at it from that paradigm, it would be exciting. If I'm looking at it from a paradigm of an actor, I get it. You're making an emotional connection with the group. There's a bunch of people. There's a bunch of emotion. So, we have songs by the Beatles that if you apply it today, it's kind of questionable when they're talking about the age of the person that's in the room, right? But so I can see it from that side. But if I take it from an outside perspective, like a parent, if I had a child and I don't know the situation, I could see that as inappropriate, especially if you apply the principle of like, there's implied authority in a sense and respect because of this person's role as that character, right? So if you take out what he does for a job, if you put in a school teacher in that position or a police officer or any other job outside of a voice actor, and they did the exact same thing, what would that room then how would that room react? If a school teacher was to do that exact same thing, would the room react the same? Would a parent react the same? So when you look at that, it's up to a debate, right? It's how does somebody feel about it? And he must have felt something because he did have to justify it saying, well, people online are going to say X, Y, and Z, but you asked me to do it. So then this is the matter of debate, right? You have an opinion.
Sorry, Ron, I dumped out for like 30 seconds.
You're back.
Button. Yeah, I accidentally hit my bookmarks bar because I was trying to get out of the topic.
I'm not touching my computer. I got to be away from it.
I've been trying not to touch it, but I have a little time tracker. That
Boomers.
Fucking boomer. So here's where I said in my analysis of this, because I kind of got the understanding of where you were going with this. And correct me if I'm wrong. So from an outsider, if I sent that video to a friend of mine who has no idea what the fuck anime is,
yes,
and they see it, they might go, "Nah, it's a little
weird.
What's going on here? It's a little weird." But you add the context to it, it makes sense, and it removes that. I don't want to say sexual impropriety. It removes that what would appear to be inappropriate from the picture, right?
True.
When you add the context, just like when you add the context to the Beatles songs,
Right.
it was the 60s or whatever, it was the 60s and this and that. Because you have to look at it in context, just like we try to do things now. You know, like, for example, all the people who get canceled because of blackface 20 years ago.
Right.
That was it okay? I know it was a joke, but you can't apply the same standards to something 20 years ago.
Right.
And, you know, you can't apply this being inappropriate without understanding what's really going on. You know, I could, you know, and this is something that sadly happens. Police will show up to a guy walking in the park with like a 5-year-old kid, and they'll arrest him, and it's his own kid.
Right.
Because some random person called the police and said, "Oh, it's a person trying to kidnap a kid."
Right.
Well, we don't know the whole context. So from the outside, you see this old guy walking with a 5-year-old girl. They're gonna go, "Oh, this person's doing something wrong," but in reality, they're not.
And that's where it's interesting in that sense, is because when it gets posted on a public forum like YouTube, it allows for people to make their own determination. Similar, like when my divorce record or my text messages with Nick, you know, or whatever they call them, DMs came out. Then people are allowed to make their opinion on that. And so when we circle back to it, it isn't my job to determine all of those factors. I'm allowed to make an opinion based on what I see. And that's where I have a problem when you talk about a lawsuit that is about somebody's reputation, because if he is openly stating in a crowded room that this potentially could bring me some level of disdain, and then continues to do that type of behavior, whereas he could have done the line from his table or from the front of the room without interacting with a fan, it would not have gotten the reaction. But as a professional, Ken, for instance, say there was something you were going to do that maybe could cause you some level of ridicule, right? And you choose to continue to do that behavior, but then later say, well, I'm going to sue because people are saying X, Y, and Z. How are you going to defend your position when you have all of this history of admitting that this is going to cause online situation?
Well, so that depends. That's a very multifaceted question,
right?
Because, you know, and I'll take you for that, right? So I'm a therapist. You know, I work with people and do all my stuff. You know, outside of therapy, you know, like I was telling these guys before you joined, and I've said before, I thrive on humor. I need it to get through what I do.
Right.
And it's just how I live. So do I tell inappropriate jokes? Damn right.
Damn right.
I do all the time.
Yes.
Obviously.
I'm definitely going to help everybody looks at my memes.
Don't look at my text and search history. That thing's going to burn when I die.
Yes.
It's set to my heart rate. If it goes off, it deletes everything.
Yes.
So, yeah. That doesn't mean that just because I say those things,
right,
that you can't, you know, I say these things in my personal time, I say them whatever, and, you know, or I say them in a form that isn't, you know, one where that, you know, because it'd be hard to take that in case I come back to my employer and go, well, he's doing this. Well, it's not impacting his clients. Now, if we apply the similar logic to the video, right?
Yeah.
Is I would think that me and you would both agree that the vast majority of people watching that video would be people who are anime fans or would be familiar enough with at least who the person is, who Vic is, and what's going on. So they will understand the context of the conversation.
Correct.
Okay. So if you do get an outsider like you or me coming into it, and I even said in my reply to you that if it was my daughter, I'd probably be like, I don't know, but
yeah,
I'm here. I'm here. If anything wrong, I'll walk up and punch him in the face.
Right.
But
what if you weren't there and you just saw it a day or
I
two
trust
later?
my daughter to make. If it was, I trust my daughter to make the right decision. There's a room full of people there that if the person's hand slid to somewhere it shouldn't have, or there would be a hell of an outcry.
Right.
That didn't happen. The person who went up with Vic didn't appear to be feeling uncomfortable, you know,
Right.
from like they didn't feel like it was inappropriate. They were giddy,
Yeah.
and so they were kind of, but it didn't come off inappropriate. Where when you take the picture of who it is, like what's going on in the environment, that's why it's very hard to judge things out of context.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't put the right framing around it, just like, you like going back to, your deposition, you said, I don't care if people call me a pedophile.
Right.
There's a frame, there's a context to that. Well, what was going on in the deposition? What was going on to lead to those questions? So
Right.
if people calling it you now, well, yeah, it bothers me, but like you said, I'm not going to go sue someone over it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you have to put it in the right framing. So I think for the most part, the things that, like that video you pointed out, I think it's not as a significant of a harm as it's been made out to be. And that's where my concern, as far as maybe, I don't know, maybe if you're perceiving it differently than me and everyone else is. And that's not saying your perception is incorrect or anything. I'm just curious to it because, like I said,
Yeah.
if I understand, even not understanding the line, I get the people in the room, the mood, it fit. It didn't come across to where, because if it was, say, a much younger person, I could see where you're crossing the line. That person looked like they were mid-teens or older than that.
Yeah.
Putting in the right thing like that, I think, maybe we're misunderstanding the context of a lot of these situations. And I think that's where these perceptions of impropriety have come across over the years.
And that's where my point about this lawsuit being frivolous is that while it's a big misunderstanding in those aspects, right? Like what my pointing to those videos for was not in a way to show that he was guilty of anything, more about that it was frivolous. Because and that's where I've been trying to point on this, is that when you're suing because of damage to reputation, and I've said this a couple times, yet you have all of this and you continue to do actions that are going to potentially damage your online reputation, you immediately, they talk about the Streisand effect on the situation because it is so out there that there is no way to prove what is the thing that actually caused the damage. And that's where my whole point in this situation is that it's open to debate. I'm not going to judge the situation if it was right or wrong, but as a professional in my business, say hypothetically,
I want to pause it by there for a moment. What Ron needs to do, he needs to come out and tell everyone on his side on KV or whatever who's supporting Monica, Jamie, that this court case is not saying if Vic is innocent or guilty. He has admitted that now quite a few times during this podcast. But he keeps going on, well, he's guilty because he lost 17-0. He lost 17-0. He went 17-0. And everyone's like, myself included, we're all like, well, it's not showing that he's guilty. He's not on trial. You're not on trial. What it's about is suing them. That's all it is, a basic sue, because they said some things. There was tortious interference, which again, I've said this before. If he didn't go to KamehamehaCon, he could have used that and they could have won it that way. But KamehamehaCon said, no, we got a contract, you can come. And what happened? They had queues 4 to 5 hours long to go and see Vic. That's just money, But Ron really needs to tell people it's not about him. It's not about, is he guilty of doing this? Well, he is because he's lost. No, it's got nothing to do with if Vic is guilty or not. That's what it is. But they just don't seem to realize that.
As a loan officer, I'm telling people that they shouldn't buy in this neighborhood because of X, Y, and Z. I know that I shouldn't do that, but if I continue to do that, I could potentially have a problem on my hands. And that's where this situation, if he was really concerned with his reputation, why do the thing? Because if you're saying where everybody's recording because everybody has a cell phone, people are going to say this online and I know that, but you keep asking me, so I'm going to do it, right? Well, if you know they're saying these things online and your reputation means something to you, why continue to do that behavior?
Well, I think what matters here is, so if we take the context of the video, so the video and other interactions like that, like you said, could be perceived as inappropriate, and people have poked, a few people historically have poked issues at it and said, this is wrong. It's been a few people. It's not been a huge public outcry. Come forward to January of last year, this stuff comes up, other accusations come up, other very significant accusations come up. It's no longer a coffee joke from an anime. It's people are accusing him of sexually assaulting them, of doing other things, of pedophilia. And the context is removed because now a vast majority of the people seeing this are not familiar with anime or familiar with Vic. So you now no longer have that very important context. So that harm now has arrived, legally and mental health wise too.
Right. And that is a valid concern. But when you look at the timeline and who he chose to bring as defendants, the people or anybody that he wants to talk about, all of that happened prior to our first tweets or our first statements. And that's the part that shows why this lawsuit was dismissed the way it was, is when you have his public statement come out where he admits to some level of inappropriate, where he has to reconsider his interactions with fans. That's part where it starts to turn to where you start to look at the past behaviors and why the lawsuit was the problem. I don't mind him coming forward. It's up for debate, but this is where I tie back to it. It isn't about if it was right or wrong in a sense. It's with this history, does it make sense to bring a lawsuit where it is your job to prove that everyone has been lying about you? And in order to prove it, everybody says this thing about evidence. And it can't just be, hey, I didn't do this, right? Especially when it's not a very emphatic no. It's been wishy-washy and then admitting that I did the things, but my intention was this way, and the other person had misrepresented it or misunderstood it. That's where the lawsuit part of it becomes the core factor of why this, in my opinion, it was such a tumultuous thing, because while everyone can see a person who maybe did some things that weren't illegal or bad, maybe it was questionable, but could have been corrected.
Tweets from Ron state, he's done this, he's done that. I know personally of 3 people who are very close, and someone who's even closer to me. He done this to them. Now he's like, oh, well, these things, these were said, this was said. Dude, you're trying to walk back over things now.
This has been going on for years, right? So if we focus on him as a person, he kind of did some things that maybe he probably wishes that he didn't. Just because it turned into something maybe he didn't want it to be, but maybe someone else did. Cool. We can get past that. Humans make mistakes. We all fuck up. Everybody's got skeletons. Everybody's an idiot. It is what it is. The part that sucks for him is then he files a lawsuit that he has to prove. He has to provide evidence. And it's not just in a statement. And I know that they talk about burden, like Nick absolutely destroyed in any way how it actually works, on how evidence works for a defendant and how burden shifting works, because that obviously didn't play out the way he thought, and it won't, because it's not how it works. We've gotten to a place where it didn't have to go, and because of ego. And that's the part that sucks, is did it have to go through this far? Did it have to cost him nearly $1 million? No, it absolutely didn't. But if you say hypothetically, you didn't lie about something, and somebody brings a lawsuit against, say I try to sue you, and I have this history, right? I have a past that is somewhat And I can say I didn't do these things because I'm like, for instance, in the thing with my ex, the affidavit, I don't have any police records. I wasn't arrested. There was no prosecution. It was an affidavit, and so there's no actual substantiated abuse besides me not being afraid to admit I fucked up and smacked somebody with a remote and threatened people. And I'm not
I
going
mean,
to.
the court found that domestic violence occurred in your case.
No, they didn't. The judge said that.
The,
But if you look at it, he said that they were giving the okay to give this protective order against me because they had it. So there wasn't ever a determination. And literally, if you can show, and that's where people say I try to justify things. In that paperwork, it's already been shown that I didn't debate whenever this happened in my child custody case because I didn't want to. I wanted to own up to my shit. And the judge put a protective order against me for a year. And then that was dismissed. So do you guys know that that was dismissed? Because Law Twitter showed that documentation. You guys have seen that all that stuff that people said against me, the judge dismissed it because...
Well, that's usually how those protective orders go.
So that's where...
Yeah. So what we saw was he said quite a few mean things to a judge, the judge's family, dogs, and he literally, in those documents, he does say literally, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you try and do this, I'm going to do that. And with that then, now again, like he's just said, he goes, oh, people say I try to justify things. This is what you're doing now. If you just left it at, well, that happened, yes, this happened, I'm getting better now. Instead of going into this deep now, because with this, people are going to try and pick this apart like anything. They are. They're going to go with the documents again, and like you said, oh, it was dismissed after a year. Well, that's because the protective order was only in for a year. Once it's done, that's it, it's gone, it's dismissed. So now it's going to be interesting to see how people pick this apart.
Like that.
When the judge says it was found, it was because in that conversation, I didn't debate it. It wasn't something that I was ever in trouble for. There was no police records. The same thing that Vic's like to say, that there was no police records. I've never been arrested. I don't have any of that stuff. It was
it's not about the police records, though. That's where my point on that is.
In that situation, that we have affidavits currently, and you're saying that you're asking me in my situation. I'm telling you that if I try to sue you, you could try to point to a lawsuit or a child custody case as your reason why you formed your opinion. I would lose the lawsuit because I can't prove, because there is documentation that would allow you to form an opinion. Now I could show this and that, but then it wouldn't ever come to anything because you can form an opinion that you want based on information that's out there, right?
No, and I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that. I think the crux of the situation, which kind of got lost in the wide net being thrown out. Like, I mean, when you file a lawsuit, you have to throw out a wide net because you never know what you can catch. That's basically the way it goes. So, like, I can understand being taken aback by certain things that you're accused of, things like that. Some things that were meant for funimation, you're getting accused of. Some things that were meant for different party, you're being accused of. I get, and that can be daunting, but at the end of the day, there's still two things that stuck out that were direct causes, or potentially direct causes of harm for Vic. Not necessarily to his reputation, but they could have been catalysts to that situation. Was that Monica brought up the situations to Funimation, which ultimately led to his termination, and your conversation with Chris Latosh, which we only have the text messages, we don't have any other context. Those are the two things that the court has in front of them to make determinations on, but whatever happens in appeals, etc. And that's what the public has right now. Yeah. And so looking at everything else, like, conspiracy stuff like that, that's all like wide net stuff. But when you're looking at it at a more focused spectrum, the cause of Vic's termination at Funimation was because Monica brought these stories towards, whether they're true or not, we don't know. That was something that should have been found out through the process, but we never got there. And then the conversation that you had with Chris Latosh, which again, something that could have been found out, but we never got there.
And that's unfortunate because we did try to depose him, which would have been very public, but which side stopped that? We tried to depose Chuck. Who stopped it? We tried to depose Nick. Who stopped it? We would love to give more information, but every time we tried, it got stopped. So if we're deposing Chris Latosh, why do you think the defendant
That's
side?
no different than you and your team preventing Discovery from coming forward.
Well,
Taking the same
hold
legal
on.
steps.
Let's hold on a second here. Just before all that, let's pull that back for just a moment,
Okay.
right? Because we're not at trial yet.
Right.
I'm going to pause the video right by there because it's getting very, very juicy now. It's getting there like this is. So it's going to be a full-on one. I can see it happening. So what we're going to do, we're going to end the video here. So if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell for future updates. And I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.